In today's class, we're going to be delving into the city of Gaza, the city of Gaza, which is not exactly, you would say, it's a cup of tea. It's not a cup of tea. It hasn't been a cup of tea, you could say, in Jewish history and possibly in world history to understand what that city, what that strip of land is all about. And especially now, we realize that we want to understand more because we know that everything has got its spiritual significance. And when we want to understand things that are going on in the world, we have to understand that they come from a spiritual source. Everything comes from the spiritual source, and the spiritual source is found in the Torah. In fact, there was the first shofet of the Jewish people in the book of Judges is who? So his name was Otniel ben Kenaz. That was his name. And Otniel ben Kenaz, who was the half brother of Joshua, just by the way, it says that he captured a city called Kiryat Sefer. Why is it called Kiryat Sefer? He captured the city because he used the Sefer. He learned his Torah knowledge about the city allowed him to capture that city. And the way it's explained that the conquest that we do on a physical level, you could say, in a war level, and and in our own lives, comes to the inner conquest that we want to make on a spiritual level. And spoke about that with Shifra about the conquest of the land of Israel is called Eretz Canaan, but it's also called Eretz Yisrael. What's Canaan? Canaan is the land of the seven nations. The land of the seven nations is the land of the Shiva Midot, the seven negative characteristic traits. And the land of Israel is the land of Yashar Kel, of being straight with God. And this conquest is the conquest, because the conquest of the land of Israel means causing a unity that is found, that is Yashar Kel. And essentially, it's the whole purpose of Jewish history is to get back to the land of Israel, to get back to Jerusalem, etc. So what is the city of Gaza all about, right? Where do we find the city of Gaza? So before we start, I'm going to tell you that the city of Gaza also has another name to it. It has several names to it, but the other name to it is called Grar, right? Gimel Resh Resh, Grar. And we find a mention of Grar in our Parsha, this week's Parsha, where there was a famine on the land, just like back with Abraham's time. And whereas Abraham left the land of Israel to go to Egypt, Yitzchak is told by Hashem, you don't leave the land of Israel. You're olat mima. You're a completely pure sacrifice. You have to stay in the land of Israel. Where did he go that was closest to outside of the land of Israel, that was in the land of Israel, kind of doing the job of being outside of the land of Israel, was this region called Grar. And there was Avimelech, the king of Plishtim. That was his name. And Avimelech, the king of Plishtim, kind of welcomes him in, and they were the Plishtim, the Philistines, right? They had food, they had what they needed, etc. And Yitzchak was there with his wife Rivka, and the Torah tells the story that he says to her, don't say that we're married. And Avimelech finds out that they really are, and finally he says, why don't you could stay here? And that was the difference between this land and the land of Egypt, that in this land there's a possibility to stay in the land, and people will not take someone's wife if they know that they are married, technically. Whereas in Egypt, that was a possibility, and that's why they left Egypt, but they stayed in Gal because of that. It was almost like they weren't moral, but there was something there. Anyway, so Yitzchak stays there. And what do we find? And it was a difficult year. Yitzchak actually does the incredible work of his mission in life, which is to dig wells. We find Yitzchak chofer be'erot. Yitzchak is digging wells. That's what he's doing. He's going around, he's digging wells, but specifically, he digs 3 wells which are mentioned in our parsha. So in the land of Gerar, which is Gaza, and we'll soon speak about why is it called that and not called, right? Why does the Torah call it that? But 1 second, let's just get to the story. So he digs these wells that were actually closed off, that the Plishtim closed off because his father was there earlier. Avram was there. He also went to Gerar. But the Plishtim, the Philistines, closed off these wells, which we know wells in Kabbalah are channels. They're channels of shefa, right? Of bestowal, of abundance, of godly abundance that comes down into the world. And the Plishtim, they covered this shefa that Avram revealed. Yitzchak comes back and he digs the wells of his father. So then so the Yitzchak leaves and he goes a little further in the city of Gerar, or in this region of Gerar, and he digs a well, and then there are fights that ensue. And they're fighting, they're warring, literally. There's a battle that's going on between Yitzchak and the people of Gerar because of the digging of the well. And it's called, the first well is called Esek. Like yesh lecha esek iti, like you have beef, like you say that in English, like you have a problem, yesh lecha esek. It's called Esek ki tasku imo, as it says. So the first well is called Esek. They dug another well, and they also fought about that. Sitna, not such a great word. Sitna is like the word, like you're thinking, right? That negative angel, and basically, it didn't work. Hate, well, it's sitna, but it's also vayate. That's where it comes from. Yeah. So then there's another well that's dug, and this final well is called Rechovot. It's called Rechovot, expansiveness. That's the name Rechovot, which is in the center of Israel, has nothing to do with this area over here, but that's the third one, and that stayed. Vayomer ki ata ichiv Hashem lanu ufarinu ba'aretz. Now God has given us the true abundance, and we can be multiple. We could expand in the land. So soon we'll see what the Ramban says on this. It's very, very profound, these 3 wells, right? But before that, we see something which is unusual. We see that both Avraham and Yitzchak go to this city of Gerar, which is modern day Gaza. Avram digs the wells, and the Philistines close them. Yitzchak comes back, and again he's having issues. So then he goes and he digs wells again. First well is contested, second well is contested. The third one stays open, and then from there he gets a blessing. The verse says that from there he goes to Be'er Sheva, to the well of 7, which is a very profound name. Be'er is a well. Be'er shel Sheva, the Be'er of the 7 levels of Kedusha, which is, again, Canaan is the seven levels of the negative. The channel of Be'er Sheva, the well of 7, is the conquest of the land of Israel, which was where Avram went first, to Be'er Sheva. From there, he went from the south, right? He went all the way up. So then God appears to Yitzchak, and he basically says, I'm giving you this land, and I will make you great in this land. And Yitzchak builds a mizbeach, an altar, and the verses continue. And they kind of make an agreement between Yitzchak and Avimelech, that beforehand Avimelech was like, who are you? And then finally, Avimelech is like, whoa, you're a Nasi Elokim, you're a godly being. God has promised you the land, so let's make a little treaty between us. And that's what they do. They make a treaty. As long as we let us live here, but if we do something bad to you, like in other words, we don't want to fight you. And that was the agreement. The agreement is if you're living here peacefully, ala nusala, right? It's like no problem. Sit on the land. So they make a little treaty over there. Now, what does the Ramban say about these three things, these three wells? He says that the three wells represent the three temples, the three Batei Mikdash. That the first well, it's called Esek. It has to do with contention, with negativity, with the three cardinal sins, basically, right? Which is killing, immorality, and idol worship. That's the reason for the destruction of the first temple, and that's the idea of the Esek. They were involved in these negative ways of life. And then the second temple, or the second well, was called Sitna, which literally means hatred. And what's the reason for the destruction of the second temple? Baseless hatred between us, between Jews, and there's no reason. And the second temple was destroyed. The third temple, finally, that's called the third temple, which is called the eternal temple, and that's called Rechovot. From Lashon Le'achiv, abundance. That Hashem, Kirchiv Hashem Ba'aretz, God is going to give us this abundance. So we know on another place the Ramban says, Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, that what the forefathers did and mothers, they opened up the channels for what will be in the future. And we see something very, very profound about this capturing and these wells that are going on specifically where? In Gerar, which is modern day Gaza. Okay. Any questions? Maybe we'll go a little further. Yeah?
So Gaza, Gerar, and Gaza are all the same.
Yes. Okay. So that's exactly where I wanted to go now, with the different ways of spelling it and the different names. So what's Gerar in Hebrew, literally? Gerar means to be dragged into something, like ligror. Like a tow truck in Hebrew is called a gerar. Literally, it's spelled like that, right? It's interesting that God says to Yitzchak, gur ba'aretz. He says gur, not gerar, but gur ba'aretz. Gur from milashon, from the level of living, but also experiencing, like having awe. Gur ba'aretz azot. But gerar is dragging, is the idea of dragging. Dragging into where? Dragging into the place of plishtim, dragging into a place of negativity. That's the energy that is found in Gaza, right? In Gerar, and that's why it's called Gerar. Another way of spelling Gaza, or it's actually in Hebrew, it's called Gaza, right? So there are two spellings to it. You could spell it in two ways. One, Ein Zayin Hey, which is the modern Hebrew way of spelling it, right? But then there's Ein Zayin Aleph with an Aleph. And it's sometimes spelled that way in the Tanakh. So we're going to go through a couple of sources. So if you want to take out a pen and paper, if you want to whatever, I'm going to go through a couple of sources over here together. So we find that at the end of Parshat Bereshit, it talks about Vayiru b'nei Elokim et bnot Adam, that the angels saw the women, and at first they said they said negative things to God. They basically were saying, look how lowly the people are. They were snitching. And God is like, well, I'm going to put you into the land. Let's see what will happen to you. And they're called Nephilim. That's the name of these angels. They're called fallen angels, which are, people may have heard of. It comes from the word Nephilim. They were Anakim. They were giants, exactly. And Nephilim ba'aretz. And these Nephilim actually had names to them. What was their names? Aza, one of them. Ein Zayin Aleph. Yep. And Azazel, which is kind of like the same, the same root, right? It's Aza and Azazel. Yeah. So these angels are called Nephilim. They're called Nephilim. Why? Because they fell down, and their actual name is these names which have the root word of Az. אנחנו זה באנגלית, בסדר? Okay, תודה. So what does it actually mean? What does the word actually mean? What does it actually mean? Az comes from the word fierce. That's the root word of Aza. It means fierce, from the word Az. And what is it? What's the context over here of the Nephilim? That they had this intensity. And the intensity was the intensity of not just falling, but they're called, if the more velocity, something has, the stronger it's going to go. The more energy it has, it'll fall down. The bigger it is, more dense, it's going to fall down harder. So these angels, they didn't just fall down, they really fell down. Whereas if something lighter would fall down, it wouldn't be as intense, but they really fell down. And it's explained that they went into the place of the desert, which is why the avodah of Yom Kippur is that the high priest would go in and do his thing in the Holy of Holies on that day of Yom Kippur, but then he would have two sheep or he-goats. Goats, right. One of them was for Hashem, and the other one was called La'azazel. They look completely the same. They looked the same, and it was by chance which one was going to go where. And at this point, there was the distinguishing mark between the being forgiven and raising up holiness versus casting away the sins to where they belong. And the verses say that they would take this goat and they would walk them all the way to a place which is called Azazel, right? And according to the Ramban and according to the Ibn Ezra and many of the Mefarshim, they say that it's makom har kashe vegavoa, like it's a tall place, and it's a tough and hard place. And I'll just read to you what one second, what the Zohar says about this.
The goat
is a very good point. And a shnei izim, a goat in Hebrew, is actually is az, because they're very fierce and very tricky. I could tell you, I was a shepherd, and so I took care of goats, and I remember that they're very fierce, but they're tricky at the same time, and they're almost like they represent the negative angel, right? They had that face of just cunningness, and it's very different than sheep. So they're dangerous. Yes. Yep. Yeah, they fight with each other and they steal. So the Zohar says like this: sorry, first the kliyaka. גורל אחד להשם, גורל אחד לעזר. נראים הדברים שבית צעירים אלו דומים ממש לשני גדיי עזים שעשה יעקב ליצחק. That these two goats were the two goats that actually Yitzchak asked, Aseli gdi izim, right? Make for me. Yitzchak asked he asked Yaakov and Esav, and they were the similar goats that Esav was going to bring, but instead Yaakov's was taken and the other one was cast away. And so the Zohar says that in fact the reason such a place is called Azazel, is called like a desolate place like that, is because that's the inhabitant, that's the habitat of the negative angel, right? That starts with a sin. And an alternate name of the desert is Azazel. That comes from the root word of Uzzah and Azael, which were these angels of intensity that brought down, right, this negativity. And so as Azal, so that's the Zohar says, as Azal, that the strength, the glory went away. And what was taken? It was the negative glory was usurped, like the negative glory. So the Talmud says that Israel, that the Jewish people, azim shebaumot, that we're the most brazen of all the nations. And you could say that in a way of like chutzpah, like having this brazenness. So we're the most azim shebaumot. But then the Talmud actually asks that it sounds like it's the opposite, because it says, what are the characteristics of the Jewish people? Baishanim, right? There were gomle chasadim, right? And rachmanim. So we're baishanim, we're actually shy. So are we fierce or are we shy? So right, but the fierce is like it says like about Shimon and Levi, that they just went in and they were just azim shebaumot. They were like crazy. They were mishuga. Like they went in and they took over, right? They were hotheads. So it says the Jewish people are azim shebaumot. Like we have this hot-headedness there.
You've seen the world. Everybody left all the world and came.
Everyone, exactly. I mean, you really see that now. We'll bring it into context. But so the Talmud asks, but we find in the Mishnah that we're actually considered the most baishanim. We're shy. So how do the two things go together? And the Talmud answers that once we got the Torah was able to soften us and give us more of an ability to have better midot, better characteristic traits, and not be like brutes and just completely like hotheads, right? But when we have Torah, then we're able to bring it down. And what's the word for that? We say Hashem oz la'amo yiten. What's the oz? Hashem gives oz la'amo yiten. Hashem mevarech et amo b'shalom. What's the oz? The Torah is called oz. O yachzik be'uzi o be'ma'uzi, the Talmud says. Oh, uzi, yeah. Or an uzi, right? An uzi actually comes from but over here the root of it is the Torah. The Torah is called oz, yachzik be'oz. And someone that has the Torah, he is able to make peace in the pamalia shalmala, in the higher worlds and in the lower worlds. And the Alter Rebbe explains that what's the peace? That through the learning of Torah, then we're able to bring together our mind of all the parts that are within our mind, which is Chachma and Bina. And we're able to bring shalom because we have the Torah. So we make peace in the higher parts of our consciousness and the higher worlds because we have Torah, instead of it being all involved in the news and all involved in but instead we have like a piece of a beautiful idea that we wrap our minds around, like a great thought. Wow. So then you have Oz and you're able to bring together your mind, and that's called Oz. And then you're also having Oz bepamalia shalmata. What's that? That's our midot. That's our characteristic traits that we have. My emotions are here and I want to do that, and that's happening. Able to have composure because able to balance out. So the Torah is called Oz because it gives us the true strength. What's the truth strength? Is the ability to bring Hashem into our lives. And it's interesting that the word Oz versus Aza is a difference of one in the numerology, right? The numerology of Oz is how much? Is 78. And the numerology, right, of Aza is 77. And so Az is sorry, Az is 77. I'm sorry, and Oz is we'll get to more numbers in a second, but Oz is 83. 1 second, is 83. Sorry, Aza is 82. My bad. Yeah, 83. And Aza is 82, meaning that the ability to have the strength over that negativity is the true Oz of Torah, right? 1 second. Okay, so
there is Azar, and there is Oz of the Torah.
And there's the Oz of the Torah. So I want to go back to some more quotes that are found in the Tanakh. Now we find that in the book of Joshua, in the book of Yehoshua, chapter 13, it says, "Min hashchor asher al pnei Mitzrayim ve'ad gvul ekrona tzafon al hakna'ani techashev 15 bnei plishtim ha'azati ve'ashdodi ha'ashkeloni ha'giti ve'ekroni." Basically, the Philistines, the Plishtim, had 5 major centers. And one of their major centers was Aza. The Gat, famously, the Ashkelon is right next to that. Ashdod is right next to that. Right? It's all like one long area, and then Gat is a little bit more inland, and that's where Goliath came from, Goliath, right? That's where Goliath came from to fight against David HaMelech. And so we find the mention of it right there in the book of Yehoshua. And it says about the tribe of Yehuda, "Vayilkod Yehuda et Aza, v'et gvula, v'et Ashkelon, v'et gvula, v'et Ekron, v'et gvula." Meaning, so we're told that Aza is in the ancestral land, the tribal land of Yehuda. In other words, it's in the same jurisdiction as Yerushalayim, you would say, right? Because Yerushalayim is Yehuda. The Beit HaMikdash is Binyamin, except for the Mizbeach, but the rest of it is Yehuda. So within the tribal land of Yehuda, we have Aza, which is meant to be conquered by who? By the kings of Yehuda, right? Including David HaMelech and including Mashiach, right? That comes from the lineage. So then we find very famously the mention of Aza in the book of Shoftim, the chapter 15, 16. It says that Samson, Shimshon, went down into Aza. Why did he go into Aza? So first of all, he wasn't from, he was from Dan. He was the area of Dan, basically. Yeah, he was a Danite. Yeah, which is closer to Beit Shemesh, and that's that area over there where he's buried. But we know the story that he went into Gaza, and he was a very interesting individual. He was the judge, the Torah judge, and he was the greatest warrior of the time that took on the Plishtim. And he goes into Gaza, and with the intention of really destroying and neutralizing the city. Shimshon HaGibor had an agenda that he wanted to go in there, and he wanted to complete, and he did it, and he destroyed. It says that he destroyed the city with his war, and finally he fell in love with a woman, Delilah. And why is she called Delilah? Because she was from Gaza. She took away his strength, and she cut his hair. So after cutting his hair, right? Many of us are remember the story or know the story, that what happened was that he's left without strength, and the Philistines grab him, and they gouge out his two eyes, right? They gut his two eyes, and the significance of the two eyes is actually very, very deep. If we find in Yirmiyah, the book of Jeremiah, he said, "Eini yardamayim," that my eye is crying. And on that, the Talmud says, the Gemara says, is the first bite Rishon, which Yirmiyahu saw, and bite Sheni, Eini yardamayim. And when Samson's eyes were gouged, it was a very deep punishment that they wanted to ensue upon the Jewish people. And so Shimshon is taken into Gaza, and in the city of Gaza. So beforehand, it says that he took the gates of Gaza. We know how big his shoulders were. His shoulders were like 20 amma by 20 amma. I mean, it doesn't make sense how big he was, but when you think about like the Hulk, he was like the Hulk. Like he grabbed before his hair was cut, he grabbed the gates of Gaza, which were made of iron or copper rather, and he put him on his shoulders, and he went up to the highest place, and we'll talk about the highest place of Gaza over there. He went to the highest place of Gaza, and he says, "I have the gates." And they all looked, and they were scared of him. They were fierce. They feared what Shimshon was doing, until he was finally caught. And then they put him, he was in captivity, and they put him in this big idolatry place of Dagon, right? Which was one of the main avodah zarah of the Plishtim. That was the name of this god, which actually has to do with Dag, and like being involved in it's a very deep kind of uncovering, in the water type of a fixing, which we mentioned last time, actually, that the sign of Ishmael is Aquarius, is Akrav, being in the water, being very and so anyways, so that's yeah. He didn't get the water right when he was in the desert, and finally he had the mayim, and we see him by the water. And then when the Jewish people left Jerusalem and they were on the way to Babylonia, they stopped and they asked the Ishmaelim, they're like, you're our cousins, give us water. And they ended up giving them sacks with they gave him salt, and then they gave them air, and they caused them to die. So anyways, yeah. Anyways, so the Shimshon is there, and he is without eyes and without any power, and he says, Hashem, zocheni na apam azot. Just remember me just one last time. Give me strength one last time. V'nakma einai, and I will take revenge for my eyes. He doesn't say, it's very interesting. He doesn't say anything else. He says, I want to take revenge for my eyes. Take revenge for what? On a very deep level, he was saying, take revenge for the temple. That there's a war over here that's waged in the city of Gaza that is directly has to do with the temple. And we find actually, again, the two eyes, maybe it's the two wells in a way, right? And then waiting for that final, for the third eye, for the real vision, right? Which it says ein be'ain. It says actually in Isaiah, it says ein be'ain you, that eye to eye we will see. We will finally see when Mashiach comes, right? will have this newfound vision. So Shimshon is killed, and so he takes down the whole the two poles, and all of these Philistines fall down, and he takes them all down with him, and he destroys it, right? And this is without a F-16 taking down the building. He took the highest, yeah. So it says later on in the book of Melachim that King Solomon, that Shlomo HaMelech, he controlled the whole region of the Euphrates, of the Nar Prat, and all the kings of Euphrates. And he says like this, from Tifsa until Gaza. Like we could say like, wow, you ruled, but you ruled from here until Gaza. You'd say, what? Right. Exactly. But you're saying like Gaza is like a big thing, like you took it on, Shlomo HaMelech. Why is it such a big thing? Why are we mentioning Gaza? Because having Gaza and controlling it is a tremendous spiritual conquest that was there during the days of Shlomo HaMelech. And yeah, so I'm going to skip a couple of sources, but I want to give you one more from the book of Amos. Yeah. כה אמר השם על 3 פשעי עזה ועל 4 לא אשיבנו. הגלותם גלות שלמה. It says, God says that God is going to take vengeance on the city of Gaza. Says this in the book of Amos. And there were 3 decrees that they did, and then there's the 4th one that they actually snitched on us, and it was very, very fierce. Like we find like the enemy, like the biggest enemies that we have really came from there. The enemies against King David came from the Philistine area, from Gaza. And it says, "V'shilachti esh bechomat Gaza ve'achla armenotea." It says in Zechariah that I will send down fire. Looks like it's kind of happening upon the wall of Gaza, and it shall devour its fortresses. That's the prophecy that's brought down. And in the book of Zephaniah,
Sorry, that's Amos what?
I forgot to put down the actual source exactly.
Oh, so I'll find this.
I'll get, yeah.
Okay.
In the book of Zephaniah, okay, so that's Zephaniah 2:4. Aza azuvati, that Gaza will be deserted. That's the prophecy of Zephaniah, which is a very deep prophet. And Ashkelon desolate. Amos, the 1st chapter. Thank you, Perek Aleph. Yeah. So the Abarbanel says as follows. Abarbanel says as follows. What are the 3 in Amos that he's saying? He's saying like this. He says, סיפר גם כן שכן השם על עזה ראש מלכות הפלישתים הסמוכה לירושלים. That Gaza is the head of the Philistine. It's like the base of the Philistines. That was their stronghold, literally as stronghold. And it's smucha, and it's close to Jerusalem. Sheliot ben aplishtim haim shloshet hapshaim, and from there they had all this negativity come from. They had idolatry, they had immorality, and they had bloodshed coming from there. Ve'od nitvosef aleim pesha acher, and they were exceedingly evil to the Jewish people. This is in Amos, and this is the Abarbanel's interpretation. That they didn't want any Jewish people in Gaza. That's what the Abarbanel writes over like 600 years ago. That's what happened.
They lost.
So let me leave you with one more amazing explanation from the Radak, and then we're going to go into some history. So the Radak, Rabbi David Kimchi, writes on our parsha where it says where Yitzchak went to Be'er Sheva. So on that chapter 26, 23. So he says over there, the Radak says he went to Be'er Sheva while he was close to Be'er Sheva. So it says Vaya'al, he rose, because where was he before? He was in Gaza, he was in Gra. Because the land of Israel is higher, it's taller. We could say on a geographic level, it's taller, but on a spiritual level. It says, when they tried to attack us, they came from below. Shaul says, let's go down. When we're going into Gaza, we're going down, whether it's literal or it's spiritual. Bechol makom. And it says, yeah. We're going down, and we're going down from the lower place to show Vaya'al Be'er Sheva. We're digging from the lowest place. That's what's going on in there. He was able to dig wells, but what was going on over there? It was a siman, it was a sign. It's a sign, the Radak says, to Yitzchak, that God is going to there's going to be strife, but at the end they're going to be victorious. And they fought against Isaac and his descendants. They will not have the control over this piece of land. The Radak lived approximately in the 1700s, I believe. Although they have it, the Radak says, they will not continue to have it. They will have it until right before the days of Mashiach. Just like the lands, and this is what he says, Keni, Knisi, and Kadmoni. You hearing this? Says that the conquest of Gaza is basically similar to the conquest of the land of the 10 nations of the Keni, Knisi, and Kadmoni, which is the level of the meta consciousness, because the land of the seven nation, which is Eretz Canaan, is the 7 emotions. But then there's this 3 intellectual levels, which are Keni, Knisi, and Kadmoni, which are really part of the land of Israel, which God promised to Abraham. So he writes, yes, so Gaza is part of it, but he says it's a part of it that's on the level that's within the land of Israel, that if we're able to conquer Gaza, it's almost like being able to conquer the Keni, Knisi, and Kadmoni, which are the meta-conscious levels that we're going to get. No, it's not part of Keni, Knisi, and Kadmoni. But he says, Kemo eretz shlosha goyim. That's what he says. He says, it is a shocker, I know. I want to go into some history. Okay. Any questions? And please let me know if this is making sense, resonating. If you are, yeah. Yes.
I have a question. Is someone talking? I can't.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thought I was interrupting someone. Just thinking, does anything that you're getting towards have to do with the tunnels? Because I was just thinking.
I want to give the sources, and of course there's so much depth that is there, that we just bringing up this information. I mean, this is Torah information and deeper spiritual information, and now we're going to go into some historical information that we can kind of put together in context. Yes.
Does the treaty, the covenant that they made with Isaac, made with Abimelech, does that have any lasting effect on us today? I mean, is it somewhat binding spiritually? Where he went to him and said, I don't want to fight with you?
well, Avimelech said that to Isaac, and the deal was
Right.
that we're going to have some sort of an amicable, you know, borders.
Relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have something that's amicable.
Okay.
But obviously in the case that, you know, we've had throughout history, it was far from amicable. So I want to bring you guys into like some history over here. Yeah. No. The land of the three nations are technically like the Saudi Arabia, Jordan. It's like very far out that's technically the part of the land of Israel during the times of Mashiach. And they represent the meta-conscious levels. They're called the land of the 10 nations. He says, the Radak says that Gaza is like the land of Keni, Knizin, Kadmoni. In other words, it's got, and we see this. I mean, we see that this is bringing out a very, very big unconscious and conscious place within us. And we're going to talk about this right now on a historical level, like how far this really goes, right? So
I thought we hold it now in Gaza. I was so happy and I choked.
So there are 7 times that Jewish people were expelled from Gaza, 7 times throughout our history. What are the 7 times? And we'll go through them a little bit. So we've had Jews living in Gaza for basically over 2,000 years. We've had Jews living there, but we've never been expelled so much from a city in the land of Israel more than in Gaza, including our own selves expelling ourselves, which is the 7th one, which is the craziest one, right? In Gush Katif in 2005. So the Romans evicted the Jews from Gaza in 61 CE. The Crusaders did that. They came, right? And we'll go through some of the history over there. Napoleon, when he came into the land, he found Jews living there and he expelled them. We have the Ottoman Turks. We've got the British Army in 1929 and the Egyptians in 1948. And then finally in 2005, the 7th one is the Israeli government itself evicting what we call the eviction of Gush Katif, which in hindsight was proven to be the biggest mistake of all, where you see interviews, people are saying, we know what's going to happen. They were saying this, it's not if it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, because what they did is they split up the 2 parts of Gaza with Jewish communities that were flourishing. So do you know that their industry, now get this, the industry in Gaza, in Gush Katif, the whole area, they had revenue of over $200 million coming, the revenue like coming a year from the Jewish communities that they were creating, like all types of organic farming and all, like a tremendous amount of ventures, and it was estimated that the worth over there was like 20 billion. Like it was a tremendous amount. And this is like referenced and once we left or we were kicked out, we were hoping that this was going to bring peace, and it did the exact opposite. And we hoped that they would also follow suit and build ventures that would make Gaza into the Singapore of the Middle East, because it's got incredible potential, and historically it was the port city of the land of Israel. The port city was either in Akko or Yafo, or there's one in Ashdod, but the biggest one closest to the south is Gaza, and it's a historic port, which still is, well, was. I'm not sure what's going on there now. Um, yeah. So let's go through some history, okay? So what happened in Gaza? Actually, we go back to Talmudic sages that are living in Gaza. And we find a rabbi called Eliezer, the son of Yitzchak, who's called Ish Kfar Darom. And it's found in the Talmud Sota. And there's referencing to rabbis that lived in Gaza, and there was a Jewish community that was living there in Talmudic times. And in fact, one of the oldest synagogues ever found in the land of Israel is found in Gaza, on the highest part of Gaza, right near the beach. Supposedly, it's a gorgeous, incredible area. It was destroyed in 1986 by the PLO. Not surprised. But what they found there in 1965, they found incredible mosaics that were incredibly preserved. I guess because of where it was, the location next to the sea, it was able to just be preserved for over 1,400 years. Where you see King David playing the kino. You see King David there, which is very interesting. Like, that's the famous preserved. And they have other structures that were there. Again, before 1986, that was a place that people could visit. You know, people that were interested in seeing history and Jewish history, and that was destroyed. Yeah, my father was there. He was in the market. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that there was a Jewish community. It was called the Jewish Square of Gaza, where there was a small Jewish community. This goes back 1967. Really, they left, but before 1967, there was a synagogue there, etc. Amazing. And in the book of the Maccabees, it says that Yehonatan, right, the youngest of the Maccabees, he went into Gaza because they were fighting him. Again, it was always this fight that was going on over there. The Maccabees were fighting, and the book of Maccabees says that they went in and he, destroyed the city of Gaza back then, right, in the Hashmonaim. And then Shimon, who after Yonatan died, Shimon became the leader of the Hashmonaim, and then he became also the king. And that's when the Hashmonaim started going losing focus. But what he did is he caused the people of Gaza to cry with a loud voice, beseeching Shimon to grant them peace. They said, "Deal not with us according to our wickedness," they said, "but according to your mercy." Yeah. Yep. And that's what they still do. You're going to go into a hospital that's booby trapped, that's filled with this or that, but but deal with us according to your mercy and not according to our wickedness. That's a quote that goes back to the people of Gaza that were imploring Shimon, and later on his grandson Alexander Yanai. So then we find that in the Crusader times, Jews living there, and again Napoleon, it goes back there, and then the Ottoman Turks, which is very interesting because they were very inclusive, but they kicked out the Jews that were there. But right afterwards, there was an influx of a lot of great chachamim, a lot of great sages. One of them was called Rabbi Yisrael Najara, who was actually born here in Sfat, and he wrote the hymn, the pizmon Kari Bon Olam, which is sung on the Shabbat table by Jews worldwide, right? That they're singing Kari Bon Olam Ve'ol Maya, right? It's sung in many different ways. It was written by Rabbi Yisrael Najara in Gaza. That's where he lived, and that's where he died. In fact, we don't know where he's buried, but he was born in Tzfat, and he was a Kabbalist of Tzfat, and he felt that he needed to go to Gaza for whatever reason to, in other words, he met the Arizal, he knew the Arizal. He was amongst these incredible giants of Kabbalah that he decided to leave Tzfat and to go down, descend down into Gaza to do whatever he needed to do. And then we have a great person who happens to be one of our ancestors, called Rabbi Avram Azulai. And Rabbi Avram Azulai drifted between Hebron, Yerushalayim, and Gaza during an epidemic in 1619. And he finally settled in Hebron from living again also in Tzfat. So Rabbi Avram Azulai, which we find like this spiritual kind of work, which is done with understanding that there's a depth there, that we need to go there and to do something there, and it comes from it must come from a very high place in order to do that, like, right? And these great Kabbalists did that. So Rabbi Avram Azulai lived there, and in fact, he wrote his book Chesed LaAvraham, which is one of the most monumental books on Kabbalah written in Gaza. And he wrote his commentary on the Zohar in Gaza. Yeah.
There's something out of the Jew.
He exactly. And he writes this in his introduction to Chesed LaAvraham. He said, I find myself in the city of Gaza. There's an epidemic that's going on, and this is happening. And he's talking about all the difficulties, and yet, like he talks about his ability to prevail, and to go on and to really capture. So that's Rabbi Avram Azulai that lived over there. I wanted to maybe just go back a little bit to the Byzantine era. That we find that that during Constantine, Christianity now came on the scene, and he basically he built churches in Gaza, and he had sort of a church, Gaza by the sea, and he wanted an independent city on the seashore free of Jews, and he made it a Judenrein city. So again, it's the Plishtim, it's the Ottomans, it's the Brit. There's something there that is very, very difficult for us. For us to capture.
Now we did.
Yeah. Well, now's exactly. There was
No politician. We have it.
A Jewish visitor called Rabbi Shlomo Volterra, who was sort of a historian. And he writes that when he reached Gaza in 1481, he said he documented his travel, and he says Gaza is called or Gaza is called by Ishmael Gaza, and it is a good and fertile land and very excellent fruits. And then he talks about the Jewish community that's there, that it's a big Jewish community, that they make wine. I don't know how they made wine, maybe grapes from the desert, which is, I don't know how they did that. And they have all these fields and houses, and basically talks about that there's abundance that's going on over there. And it seems like when the Jews lived there, there was abundance that was there. They had incredible.
Is that connected to Is that connected to Isaac sowing and receiving 100-fold
It definitely,
in the time of famine?
it's definitely there. Exactly. Yitzchak received 100 times. So there's something there, which 100 times is a very deep number. It means like it's going exponential. It's sowing in the land and getting something exponentially way more than even what we put in, which is the source of abundance, right? Of true abundance. Now something very major happened in Gaza that had to do with a false Messiah. Does anyone know? A false Messiah, Mashiach Sheker. So it's very messianic. So we have Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah, had his most famous student was called Natan of Gaza. That was his name, Natan of Gaza. He lived in Gaza, and he followed Shabtai Tzvi. And now listen to this. In the holiday of Shavuot in the year 1660, the Jews in Gaza gathered in the synagogue, the one on the hilltop, which is called on the Jewish quarter. Nathan of Gaza declared in a loud voice in the synagogue that Shabtai Tzvi is the savior of Israel, the Mashiach of God, of Jacob. And the entire congregation responded, "Long live our king Shabtai forever." From that moment, Shabtai Tzvi himself also began to believe that he was indeed the Mashiach. Gaza became the center of the Sabbatian, the Shabtai Tzvi movement. You hearing this? Like, it's crazy. There's the head of like this movement to repel like the true like revelation of Mashiach, like that. It happens there in Gaza by his student Natan of Gaza. Yeah. In the 1800s, the Chida, who was the grandson of Rabbi Avram Azulai, comes through Gaza, and he speaks about an active Jewish community that was there. And seems like they came back every time they were kicked out, and they came back. And then there's the occupation of the Pasha called Ibrahim in 1831, which he was an Egyptian ruler, which took over the whole area from Egypt all the way down to Ashkelon. And what he wanted to do is he took apart there was a synagogue in Gaza, and he destroyed it. And he said to use it for a mosque somewhere else. Later on, those rocks were taken and they were used as for the synagogue of Avram Avinu Shul in Hebron. So the Avram Avinu Shul is a very important synagogue in Hebron, which they say Avram Avinu came to, revealed himself in. And the rocks of the Avram Avinu Shul actually come from these rocks that were destroyed in the Shul in Gaza by this Pasha Ibrahim. It's pretty wild. And in 1883, there was a newspaper, a Jewish newspaper called the Levanon, and there was an author there, and he writes in this newspaper. He says that I passed through a street called Harat al Yahud, the street of the Jews. I recognized the mezuzah on the doorpost of the houses, a place where the mezuzah had a fixture. I also saw the place where Jews in the synagogues were there. He says now Catholics are building a shelter for themselves there. And in 1883, 1883. And then in 1889, there were riots in all over Israel, including Hebron, and the Avram Avinu Shul was destroyed. Then there was a rebuilding of Gaza again. 30 Jewish families decide to go back in there and to have another chance at it. And then they get kicked out in World War I. So 1917. So you're following this, like they are kicked out and they come back. Like from 1883 to 1886, it seems like they were kicked out. There was riots. And then they come back again in 1886 until 1917, World War I, where the Turks were no great friends. They kick out, they expel all the Jews, and the Jews come back, and again in the riots which happened throughout, and actually in Hebron and Tzfat, and also there, they leave. It's kind of hard to follow. And then Jewish settlement in Gaza after the Six-Day War, again, we came back in 1967, and there was actually an agenda to try to, to rebuild or to have our foothold there, and then we were kicked out. Now, my friends, this brings us to where we're at now in world affairs, because it's not just a war over here between Israel and Gaza, right? It's a war which is really just worldwide, and it's all over the news. Like, it's all over the news everywhere you go. And the truth is that we in Israel have not wanted to deal with Gaza since we left Gaza in 2006. And right there in 2008, there was a kidnapping of Gilad Shalit, taken into custody. And from there, they learned that if they keep him, they could exchange 1,000 of them to come back and to become more empowered, emboldened to do even more. Because look at the Israeli government. They're running away. They're grar. They're like they're running away from us. And then in how many bouts did we have? Then we had the in 2008 we fought them, and then 2011 Tzuk Eitan, 2014, 2018. And basically where we lost soldiers and we just didn't want to deal with this situation that we called Gaza, right? Until now. That now they wish that they had gas. They don't have any. So now we're going in, but now we need Oz. Now we need the real fortitude to go in there. We need the Oz of the Torah. We need the Oz of the Maccabim, right? The Oz of the strength of going in there. And it's interesting that Rabbi Yisrael Najara wrote a pizmon, a song for the Maccabees in Gaza, in Kislev. And he says that the Maccabees will be back. The Maccabim will be back. And it's interesting that one second. Yeah. That Azah Ein Zayin Aleph is in numerology is 78, which actually has to do with war. 78 is gematria, is numerology of milchama, right? Of war, or lochem, right? It has to do with war. The word itself is Azah. Actually, the gematria of Azah is lochem, which is gematria also 3 times Shem Havaya, which is also melach, which is why we're supposed to dip the salt. The Arizal says in melach 3 times, Hashem melech, Hashem malach, Hashem 3 times, because on the shulchan we eat lechem, which is the same root as lochem, right? And our shulchan is like in the conquest of that. So the gematria of Aza is lochem, is lechem. And in fact, according to the Arizal, on Yom Kippur and on Rosh Hashanah, we say uvechen, ten pachdecha, which bechen is gematria 72, which is chesed, and we want to say Hashem, draw down chesed upon us. But we don't start bechen, we say ubechen with a vav. And the Arizal tells us why ubechen with a vav, because ubechen with a vav is 78, which is the three names of Havaya, 3 times, and has to do with conquering, with milchama, with lechem, ubechen ten pachdecha, to be able to conquer, to be able to have the milchamot, ilchom milchamot Hashem, veyatzliach, to win the wars of Hashem, and to be successful. So we find that Aza has the same gematria as war, as uncomfortable as it, and the root of it is Az, to be fearsome, and to be fearless, right? But to realize that we have the Oz, right? We have the Nachal Oz, we have the Oz, and it's interesting that the kibbutz next to it is called Nachal Oz, right? A stream of Oz. And the other one's called Be'eri, which is maybe because of the Be'erot of Yitzchak, right? Or it's called Be'eri, of going deeper into our resolve and our strength of fighting this negativity, which is found in the physical place called Aza, right? But on a deeper level, found within ourselves, our own psyches, where what is the strength to fight, to have this milchama? It's called Mesiut Nefesh, self-sacrifice. The self-sacrifice is the self-sacrifice that we're seeing with the incredible soldiers, right? The incredible people, the resolve of the people of Israel, of going in and saying, no more of this, no more of like bouts, no more you're going to tell us that we can't be here, or can't be that. It's like we have the ability to really humanely, like the Gazan begged Shimon to do, like, don't treat us the way we would treat you, right? Basically. So it's interesting that the word ma'oz is 123. We sing this, ma'oz tzur, right? On Chanukah, ma'oz tzur yeshuati, with the last stanza we mentioned last week from the Maral, is the Admon betzel tzalmon. Who's betzel tzalmon? The Maral says that the Western world is living in the shadow of the Ishmaelim. And that's how it ends off. We're learning about the 4 exiles, and the last exile is the exile of Ishmael, which is currently found in, or the Philistines, or the Palestinians, whatever you want to call them, which are found in Aza. We sing the Maoz Tzur, 123, which is also the gematria of the years of the life of Aaron. The Rambam says that the years of Aaron is 123, who is the father of the Maccabees, of light. Says that your strength is the strength of Gdolah Shelcha Mishalam, because you have the ability to light the candles, the lighting of the candles of the Beit HaMikdash, to light the candles of Zion, to light the light of the Chanukah candles. And actually the sign of Israel, modern day Israel, is what? Is the menorah, is the candelabra. It's not just the Magen David, it's the menorah. It's lighting the menorah, lighting the candles. The strength of Mesiut Nefesh of the Maccabim, which were there in Aza. The Maccabim were in Aza throughout the time. Rabbi Saul Najara sings a song for the Maccabim. He makes up a song for the Maccabim in Aza. He's buried in Aza, right? The light of the Zohar, the commentary of the Zohar by Rabbi Avram Azulai, who was a student of the Arizal, and the Holy Ramak, and Chief Rabbi of Hebron, written there in Aza, the light. And this analogy of the light is basically the analogy of the Be'erot, of the 3 wells that were being dug. The first well, we're get kicked out. Second well, get kicked out. There are many more times again in the history of Gaza, but there's going to be a third time, like the Radak writes, Rabbi David Kimchi writes, that right before Mashiach, we're going to get Gaza back. That's what he says. Rabbi David Kimchi, a Radak, in our parsha, chapter 26, verse 23. You could look it up. The Radak writes this. That right before Mashiach, we are going to get Mashiach. We're going to get that back. But also, the Bala Turim says an unbelievable thing on our parsha, or at the end of last week's parsha, that talks about the death of Ishmael, and then it says Ele Toldot Yitzchak. What's the closeness of juxtaposition? So he says when Ishmael, before the days of Mashiach, when Ishmael will be defeated, then the offsprings of Yitzchak will have their time to shine, basically. It says Ele Toldot. He says, and I'll just quickly quote that for you, that he writes that Ksheipol Ishmael b'achrit hayamim az yitzmach ben David, then Mashiach is going to become revealed, who is from the offsprings of Yitzchak. That's what the Bala Turim writes. So we've got so much over here that there is so much to say further from the Zohar that really speaks about this. And I know that we're kind of running late on, but
So it's no small synagogue was just rededicated yesterday.
Right. A synagogue that was in one of the communities of the of Gush Katif. Yeah, amazing. But it's a crazy thing that they left everything intact because the Israeli government and the UN basically left them greenhouses. They didn't destroy.
Yeah, the streets look the same.
They went there and they destroyed. They made it into a center of sending rockets into Israel. And now we're doing the opposite. We're taking back that area that was, again, like almost like with Avram's wells that were shut, and we go back there and we dig again. And this is what we're doing, right? Like Yitzchak Avinu in Gerar. Yitzchak is the midah of what? Of Gevurah. Malchut comes from Gevurah. Like Mashiach is from this place of strength, of showing strength, right? The strength of the conquest of Oz is what is staying at it and being steadfast in what we need to do in the conquest. Yeah, but Malchut mostly comes from Gevurah. That's what it's explained. Yes. Yeah. So, okay. The prophecies are here. So it's unbelievable what we're seeing. We're seeing like soldiers that are going in, and they all have the tzitzit on. You know, most of them have the tzitzit on. They realize that having the emunah, having the faith, having the connection to Hashem, that finally we're fighting, but we're not just fighting anything. We're fighting a just war for not just for our survival, but we're fighting a just war for humanity. Because if darkness like that could exist, then it's not just Israel, you know, and Iran is saying the same thing, and they're saying the same thing. They're coming after Europe, and they're coming after the US. And the world is absolutely sleeping on this on so many levels. But the point is that we can't sleep, and we realize that it doesn't matter what's going on in the world and what they're saying. We have to have the oz, we have to have the strength, we have to have that nachal oz, that inner strength. And it's interesting actually that the block or the street of the prime minister in Jerusalem off Keren HaYesod Street is called Rehov Aza. It's called the Street of Aza. Actually, that's where the prime minister lives, believe it or not. All prime ministers, they live on the street of Aza. So they're in Jerusalem, it's called the Rehov Aza. That's where the prime minister's dwelling is. So we have so many.
But you say Asa is an angel.
Asa is a fallen angel, and we have a job to now contend with the angel, which is the work of Jacob contending with the angel and being successful at contending with the angel. Right? Why? Because we have Hashem that's with us. We have this conviction, this emunah that's inside of us.
When did the G get put in
The
front
power
of
is,
it?
is with the Aleph. Yeah.
So now it's Gaza.
Now it's Gaza. So
We call it out.
right. So
Or why did the G get put in front of it?
so that's the way it says Muslims used it. They pronounced it. So they pronounced it that way.
Okay.
But I was thinking about that actually Zayin and Gimel, the way you write them could be interchangeable, like on both sides. And yeah. So they're interchangeable. One is maybe not for now, but one of them is more from the right side or the left side. It's like a different type of a realization. One more thing, last thing about this is that, with the fallen angels, it says that one of the children of the fallen angels was Og. And eventually these giants became, somehow connected to the idea of Goliath, which is where King David got his reign, right? And he said that you're mentioning, you're coming to me with your all of this and this, and I'm coming to you b'shem Hashem tzvakot. Says I'm small, but I'm not scared. I'm gonna come at you. Why? Because I have this emunah, right? And a slingshot and five rocks, which the commentaries say have to do with the 5 books of the Torah, that he's coming with the strength of Torah. That's his strength, King David's strength, although he's physically small. Israel's physically, or geographically a small country, but very powerful. Right? And trusting our strength, that our strength comes from Hashem, not just from the IDF. And that's a very big distinction to have. Because when we think that our strength comes from the IDF, then Hashem is like, okay, everyone knows that it's miracles. There are people that are secular soldiers that are on the field in Gaza. And they literally are using the terminology, the Shekhinah is in this, driving with me. Like I'm feeling the divine presence that's with me. This is someone without, a kippah, without it. They have tzitzit, of course, but they're like, it's they feel it. And it's incredible. It comes from Hashem. Exactly. And so, my friends, we have to, first of all, I'm glad that we were able to unpack, some of this information that is Torah sources and history, so that we have a context of what this war is actually about. But what is the war about? Just like the war of Shimshon, Hagibor, that went with what? Because he was a Nazarite. He was a Nazir. He was connected to Hashem fully. The war of King David that was held in Gaza, actually, right? The war of all these greats that were there. This is the war that we're fighting right now. It's the war right before Mashiach. Like the Radak says, that when we have Gaza is on the same level or a similar level of the meta-conscious levels that we're going to experience when Mashiach comes. So we're going through a difficult birth pain, growing pain, all of us, or as individuals and as a collective, in a major way, that we're forced to remember what we are. It's a collective trauma. There's craziness that's happening. Yet at the same time, we know that Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati. Who is my strength? Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati. Who is my strength? The Tzur. The Tzur is called the rock. Hashem is my strength. Yeshuati, right? And that's where we draw our strength from, whether we're on the front lines, and God bless all the holy soldiers that are on the front line and in the back line, and those that are cooking and those that are creating, and we're all on the front line on some way, and wherever we are, to know that that's what we're singing. We're singing the Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuati. We're going through this battle of the Maccabees, back again. In 2023, that is resung, right? The Ma'oz 123, like the years of Aaron, and the strength of illuminating light, and to know that at the end that we're a light unto the nations, right? And we could take a land that is so difficult and create a revenue of over $200 million coming in from a place, right? It's not about necessarily the money. It's just the idea of the transformation that's possible, of bringing light, bringing ingenuity, bringing goodness to the world, not bringing killing and the abyss and negativity and riots and chaos and hatred, which is what Ishmael is, Pere Adam, complete animal, right? Of just storming government buildings and etc. That's their oz. But what's our oz? Our oz is the light of the candelabra. That's our strength. Like we know that we have this oz. That's our oz. Is the shining of the light. Whatever the world thinks it is, but they all know what the Jewish people have done and are doing. And without the Jewish people in this world, there wouldn't be light. There wouldn't be a world, right? There would still be Stone Age people eating each other up, right? So, yeah, but we're not paying attention to the news, because that's not even that's old news. I mean, we see history repeats itself. So we're like, I'm familiar with the inner news. The inner news is what's happening in the Torah, what's happening that's the true news. That the Parsha, living with the Parsha of the week, that's living with the times, not living with the New York Times skewed editorials or the BBC or the whatever it is. It's going into the Torah's news. So wishing you all many blessings. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, Norman. Baruch Hashem. I'm glad that this was helpful and informative, and something to meditate on, in our own, we could say, Gaza struggles, that knowing it's a difficult struggle, but it's the last war. This is basically, it's the last war that we're on. And the tzaddikim, and they're all saying this is the last war. So we're bracing ourselves, and we know that Hashem is with us. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Many blessings.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.